What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and I know a lot of you guys are cramming before your fantasy football draft this weekend. So today, I am going to give you a crash course on how to win your league. This is going to be an accelerated draft strategy video where we talk about everything you need to know in 20 minutes or less. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new. And the first thing we're going to talk about is not running back strategy or wide receiver strategy. We're going to get down to basics and talk about the fundamentals of fantasy football, because I see all the time people showing up to their draft unprepared. Know what you are signing up for. Know the payouts. Know what the settings are. How many wide receivers can you start? How many running backs can you start? Is there tight end premium? Is there super flex? Is it 6-point passing touchdown? Is there weird quirks like first down bonuses or 100 plus yard rush bonuses? Know all of these things. I have a quick format guide here you guys can look at where I just go over how I would approach these league settings. If it's an 8 to 10 man league, focus more on starting lineup and quarterback and tight end. 14 plus team leagues, you're going to want depth there because things are going to get ugly. 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, or shallower lineup leagues, you want to put more emphasis on quarterback and tight end because they make up a higher percentage of that starting lineup. Tight end premium, push up the tight ends. PPR, push up wide receivers and pass catching running backs, so on and so forth. Then we want to know our league mates. We want to know, is this going to be a running back hungry league? Is it going to be a wide receiver hungry league? If it's super flex, when are the quarterbacks going to go off the board? Know all of these things about your league mates. You guys will see I stream every single night on the channel. I have Jahmyr Gibbs as my 102, which, by the way, if you're looking for draft rankings, you can find that on my Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I'll have that down below in the description and pinned at the top of the comment section with my top 200 cheat sheet, tiers, all of that good stuff. But I have Jahmyr Gibbs ranked at my 102 as my RB1, but there are some situations where if I'm drafting on a site like Underdog that's very wide receiver heavy, I will take CeeDee Lamb as high as 102. So what I'm trying to say is know your league mates. If I'm in a league that's going to be very running back hungry, or if I'm in my home league with my high school buddies, that's going to be a league where I take Jahmyr Gibbs 102. What I would say is break ties towards your league mates' tendencies. And what I mean by that is if you have, say, Derrick Henry and Drake London as 2 players in the same tier that you feel is a coin flip between the 2 of them, break the tie to Derrick Henry if you know your league is a very running back hungry bunch. Then know what platform you're drafting on. This is one of the biggest edges in fantasy football, is just knowing the site that you will be on, because your friends are going to be drafting off of the default rankings there, right? It's going to have, player 1 through 200, and they're going to be picking off of the list given to them by the website. So what I would check out is a tool that I had a subscriber help me build over this offseason. It's completely free. All I ask is that you subscribe and leave a like if you use it. I'll have it down below in the comment section, but you can see high stakes ADP where people are playing for $350 a pop and comparing it against ESPN, Sleeper, and Yahoo. In this example is Emeka Egbuka. He is one of the bigger values across all 3 platforms. You can see he's going as high as the 506 in high stakes over on the NFC. You can compare that to Sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo. He's a value across the board. And what this allows you to do is that if you know you're drafting on Sleeper or Yahoo or ESPN, you can then just sort by those sites and see who the best values are and shape your draft strategy around where players are going on your site. Now let's get more in the weeds and talk about position by position draft strategy, starting with running back draft strategy. The idea here is that you want to understand the risks of running back while also understanding the upside. It's a little bit like playing with fire when you draft a running back. They bust at a high rate, but they also can give you seasons like last year with Saquon Barkley. And what I'm getting at here is this idea coined by Pat Crane of don't draft an early round running back without legendary upside. You cannot be drafting for floor when you take a running back in those first 2 rounds, because we are just better at drafting wide receivers. When we talk through points per game to ADP correlation over the last 2021 to 2024 time span, you can see wide receivers have a higher correlation in terms of ADP to points per game. We're just better at predicting things when it comes to wide receiver. Then when we look at bust rates, running backs are busting at a higher rate than wide receivers in those first 2 rounds. So if running back has such a high bust rate, you should just be taking wide receivers unless you are shooting for maximum upside at the running back position to offset the risk. That is the idea of drafting a legendary upside running back. As you can see over the last 5 years, drafting the RB1 overall in fantasy has taken your win rate from 8.3%, 1 divided by 12, all the way from 15.6% to 24% clip in terms of win rate, which is just absolutely nuts. The beauty of it all is that these running backs, the RB1 overall candidates, are getting drafted inside of the top 2 rounds over the last 5 years. So in that same range where we know running backs have a lower floor is the same range where running backs are drafted to be the RB1 overall in fantasy. So the idea is know what you're signing up for, but just swing for maximum upside, because you're going to have a similar strikeout rate across the board, but you want to offset that by having home run capabilities when you're drafting running backs. Now, in the past, when we talk about rounds 3 through 6 running backs, I have said, well, this is the RB dead zone. These are the running backs you want to be avoiding, but that isn't true in the modern era because running backs are getting drafted as late as ever. When we look at ESPN's default ranking, so just their run-of-the-mill PPR cheat sheet that they give out for free, we can see in 2020, 13 of the first 14 picks were running backs, with the RB13 getting drafted at the 202. And the reason I use RB13 is because that's just a high-end RB2. I think it gives you a decent gauge of how running backs are valued. We fast forward to present day here, and the RB13 is getting drafted at the 312. That is about 2 rounds later on, which is just absolutely nuts considering where we are in fantasy football at this point. And what that's created is an efficient market where if we look at projected PPR points for running backs and wide receivers, and then we plot them by their home league ADP on Sleeper and ESPN, we can see from picks 1 through about 60 to 70, running backs and wide receivers projected the exact same, meaning that you can take running backs in this area. I just wouldn't get greedy and draft like 4 running backs through 6 rounds, because at that point, you're loading your team up with a ton of risk. I would draft anywhere from 1 to 3 running backs through those first 6 rounds so that you can then still shift focus to wide receiver once we get to the flex zone, right? Where after these 2 lines sort of converge here, you can see wide receivers are then outscoring running backs from about pick 65 to 70 all the way throughout the rest of your draft, meaning that once we're drafting for flex pieces in round 7 on, we want to be shifting our focus through wide receivers. Now, of course, if you only draft 1 running back through 6 rounds, you're going to have to draft some running backs in this area, and that's what I would say. Just understand that the more running backs you draft in rounds 1 through 6 means the less running backs you draft from rounds 7 on. If you take 3 running backs at the top of your draft, you do not need to hammer a running back in round 8, 9, 10. Like, you are already good. You are set with those top 3 running backs. You can then shift your focus to making up ground at every other position, one of them being wide receiver. So let's talk through wide receiver draft strategy for 2025. There is plenty of reason to take running back early, but there's also plenty of reason to take wide receiver early. And this is a chart from the Anatomy of a League Winner article from Ryan Heath, in my opinion, the best draft strategy article from this offseason. You can see in round 1, in terms of league winner rates over the last 2 years, wide receiver beats out running back. Then in round 2, running back and receiver are very good. And then running back actually kind of beats out receiver from rounds 3 through 6. And I'm not saying you should follow this exactly. Don't force, Puka Nacua over Jahmyr Gibbs because you heard that round 1 wide receiver is better than round 1 running back. It's not 100% true. It's 2 years of data, but you can see that there is plenty of merit to taking wide receivers early on. The idea is that wide receivers are safer. They're still giving you super high league winner rates, and you want to have probably about 3 wide receivers through round 6, because if you can build out your wide receiver spots in the first 6 rounds, then you can shift your focus to making your flex really pop from round 7 plus when it comes to receivers, because on these home league sites, we can see that there's just values across the board. Emeka Egbuka is the 506 in high stakes. You can get him at the 708 by consensus. Same with Ricky Pearsall, 602 by high stakes, 710 in consensus. Matthew Golden, Jordan Addison, Deebo Samuel. Even Deebo, who's not even like a rookie or young player, is a value as well. So that's kind of the idea, is that in round 7 plus in home leagues, wide receiver values will be very good. So definitely get some wide receivers to anchor your team early, but understand once you get to round 7 plus, you can start spamming wide receivers through your flex spot. Now, a side note here is that you want to be targeting rookies on these home league sites, right? We have Matthew Golden we just talked about, and you can see if we look through the ESPN championship teams over the last 2 years, in terms of players on 15% or more of these teams, about a quarter of them have been rookies over the last 2 years, with Sam Laporta, Puka Nacua, Bucky Irving, Brock Bowers, Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, Devon Achane, CJ Stroud, and all of these guys have an average ADP of pick 140. So once you get to round 7 plus, even 10 plus, rookies become one of the best player bets that you can make. Now, shifting back to wide receiver strategy, how we want to make sure that we have wide receivers through the flex, right? When we talk about the optimal setup when it comes to your flex spot, right? Running backs early, and then once things shift to wide receivers outscoring everybody, you want to build your team in a way that you have wide receivers in the flex spot almost always. And how you do this is that I've had this rule of thumb for a while of you want to draft wide receivers through the flex spot plus 1 or 2 by round 10. So if it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, you want to draft 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, that's 3, plus 1 or 2, that's 4 to 5. If you have a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, 2 wide receivers, 2 flex, that's 4, plus 1 or 2, that is 5 to 6, so on and so forth. Now, I will say as well, the less wide receiver and flex spots, right? So if you know in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, you're only going to end up with 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. You only need to draft 4 to 5 wide receivers through round 10. You can break ties away from wide receiver knowing that 5 to 6 picks in your first 10 rounds are going to be running back, quarterback, and tight end. So just something to think through. I don't want to see people, yes, you want to have wide receivers in your flex, but I have seen overkill before where in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, people draft, wide receivers through the flex plus 3 through round 10, and then you just have guys on your bench you're never going to use. So be mindful of how shallow or how deep your bench is. Now, after that, let's get to quarterback and tight end draft strategy here. Let's pull back up the league winner rates. You can see rounds 3 and 4 for quarterback is kind of a cheat code, which for me says you want to be drafting. I'm not going to say you need to draft an elite quarterback on every team, but if you're going to take an elite quarterback or tight end, I would personally lean towards quarterback. If you can do it, I love Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. All 4 of those guys are great picks. Now, I will say I also do love George Kittle, Brock Bowers, and I don't mind Trey McBride, but I will definitely admit that the numbers don't say that it's a great idea to draft him. Now, what I will say on top of this is that if you take an elite quarterback, right, let's say you take a Lamar Jackson in round 3, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they then draft, Tua Tagovailoa in round 16 just to have a backup quarterback. There's no need. You can get a quarterback off waivers later on. If you draft an elite quarterback or an elite tight end, do not draft a second one. What I would say my rule of thumb is that if you draft a quarterback or tight end inside of the top 6 rounds of your draft, do not draft a second one. This roster spot on your bench, instead of getting a Brenton Strange behind your Trey McBride, should be a running back upside swing like Dylan Sampson or Ollie Gordon, guys who can be real breakout players. Now, I will say, if you miss out on both quarterback and tight end, it's not the end of the world. At that point, you just want to have monster running backs, receivers, flex depth, all of that, and you can still get away with, a Patrick Mahomes or Sam Laporta. These guys are upper echelon, but not elite quarterbacks or tight ends when you are thinking through strategy. Now, let's get to kicker and defense. I don't talk about kicker and defense much, but I do get this question. Do not draft them until your last 2 rounds of your draft. Only roster 1 of each. Do not take 2 defenses and play the stream. You can just drop them, take another one off of waivers, and start them that week. And the site I use, I have no affiliation with them. They were just around when I was coming up in the fantasy football space. Subverter Down, they have good projections for defense and kickers every single week. But I will say, just sort of looking at Vegas lines and seeing what quarterback is going to play, and then looking at consensus rankings or even just like the projections on your site, isn't a bad idea for kickers and defense either, which then takes us to an overall summary of what we've covered here today. Here are my draft guidelines. First up, we want to take the best player available through rounds 1 and 2 and then build our team around that. Then with running backs drafted in round 1 and 2 should have an emphasis on league-winning upside. You want to have 2 running backs through 6 rounds, maximum 3, but preferably 2 through 6. Then in round 7 plus for running backs, you take them as needed for depth based on how many you selected earlier. So if you took 3 up top, you could go the rest of your draft without taking another running back. If you took 1 running back through 6 rounds, you're definitely going to want to take a couple stabs in round 7, round 9, round 12 on, and really build out a lot of depth at running back. Then for wide receivers, you want to have 3 or more through round 6. You want to have wide receivers through the flex spot plus 1 or 2 by round 10. Elite quarterback and tight end is an either-or situation for me. I didn't cover this when we talked about quarterback and tight end, but unless if it's a shallower league, right? So 8 to 10 teams or 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. If you have to worry about in a 12-team league starting 2 wide receivers and 2 flexes every single week, you can't do elite quarterback and tight end. It's going to take too much away from your flex pieces. You're going to get a startable tight end or quarterback off of waivers. So for me, it's an either-or situation. Then if you want to draft quarterback and tight end, I would go either early or late. Get an elite guy up top or wait until later. Don't take a Bo Nix in round 7 or a Baker Mayfield in round 7. At that point, punt it off. Take your Drake May in round 11. Take your Trevor Lawrence in round 13 and be absolutely fine there. Again, if you draft a quarterback or tight end inside of the top 6 rounds, do not draft a second one on your team. And then kicker and defense, don't draft them until the last 2 rounds of your draft. Only roster one of each. And if you need a website that has good projections, check out Subvertidown. Now let's also show an example where I abided by all of these guidelines. This is a 16-round draft I did over on RT Sports. This is a $300 entry that I'd streamed on this channel. I stream these every single night on the channel if you want to come around and see me draft a team. Now for this example, it's a full PPR, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flex, kicker and defense. I wasn't forced to draft kicker and defense on this team, so I didn't. I will pick them up before week 1. But you can see, I took best player available in the first 2 rounds by how I have my ranking set up. I took 2 running backs through 6 rounds. I have an elite quarterback in Jalen Hurts. I have 3 or more wide receivers through the first 6 rounds. I have wide receivers through the flex, right? So Jefferson, Higgins through wide receivers. Hunter Odunze through the flex. Debo is our wide receiver through the flex +1. And that, to me, is good. We have wide receiver through the flex +1 by round 10, and we are set up beautifully. We take 2 tight ends because we punted tight end. We took Goddard and Zach Ertz late, and that abides by all of our draft guidelines. This is one of my favorite teams I have drafted on stream. I will say, get some practice in as well. Check out Underdog. You can get drafts in on there for as little as $5, $3, $1. When you use promo code RON and you play $5, they will give you $50 in bonus funds to go practice. You can see what rooms look like. You can see when there's money on the line where players are going. Then you get to your home league and you can find all of the values there, right? Where like an Emeka Egbuka will be gone in the first 60 picks. In your home league, you might get him in the 7th round. You can find my link in the description and the comment section down below. I'll also say, if you want to dominate your draft, use my rankings, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I have my top 200 rankings cheat sheet there. They're separated by tiers. All of my targets, my fades, my target rounds for every player, all of that is on there, patreon.com/Ron Stewart, for literally just $10. All of that in the description and the comment section down below. And then I'll just say, watch my other videos. I put out a running back rankings video this week, a wide receiver rankings video this week. I've talked way deeper in terms of draft strategy throughout the entire summer. All of that is available. Just scroll through my channel and find anything that piques your interest. But with all that being said, good luck out there. Win your leagues. If you enjoyed, subscribe, leave a like. And I will say, during the season, if you want in-season management help, we talk through waiver wire, trade targets. I talk through what rookies are kind of popping in my rookie receiver report. All of that, everything you need, you can find on this channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and I'll see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold.